Welcome to the Filing Status module. Let's get started. In this lesson, you will learn about the different filing statuses. We will introduce you to the flowcharts and the publication 4012 that you will use in the tax office. And we'll finish with some filing status practice exercises. But we'll begin with an introduction to the main tax forms.
U.S. individual income tax returns are prepared on Form 1040. This is where you can find the most important information about a client's tax return, like their filing status, income, deductions, and tax credits. Though most of the important information is located on Form 1040, some clients will have more reported on Schedules 1, 2, or 3. Schedule 1 reports additional income sources as well as adjustments to income. Schedule 2 reports other taxes, and Schedule 3 reports credits, although most of the important and widely claimed credits are included on the base 1040.
The 1040 form is a summary that often comes with detailed forms and schedules attached. Examples of forms include Form 8888 to split a refund into different accounts or purchase savings bonds, and Form 2441 used to claim child care expenses. Examples of schedules include Schedule EIC to claim the Earned Income Credit and Schedule A for itemized deductions. The top of the 1040 is for personal information, such as the taxpayer's name and spouse's name if married, their address, social security numbers, and where they can choose if they want $3 to go to the presidential campaign fund. The top of the 1040 is also where filing status is selected.
Let's talk about the 5 different filing statuses. They are married filing joint, qualifying surviving spouse, head of household, single, and married filing separately. These are in order from the most beneficial to the least beneficial. Your filing status is responsible for your tax rate, the amount of your standard deduction, and eligibility for credits. We will start with single. Since it is the easiest to determine, it's basically someone who is not legally married. If you were divorced on or before December 31st of the tax year, you would be considered single. Note that Maryland does not have legal separation status. So if someone in Maryland tells you that they are separated but not yet divorced, that has no significance to the state of Maryland or to the IRS. Those people usually have to file as married filing separate. You could also be considered single if your spouse died before January 1st of the tax year. Married filing joint. This status is for legally married couples. Marital status is determined on the last day of the year. If a couple was married on December 31st, they're considered married for the entire year. Couples can file jointly even if one of them has no income. Qualifying surviving spouse used to be referred to as qualifying widow or widower with a dependent child. This is a rarely used filing status. While we do see many widows at the tax sites, this filing status has a few other requirements that must be met. Taxpayers are only eligible for 2 years after the spouse dies, and they must have a dependent child. The year the spouse passes away, the taxpayer should file married filing joint with the deceased spouse. After that, they may use this filing status if they have a dependent child that lived with them all year and paid more than half the cost of maintaining a home for the dependent child. Be sure to ask for a copy of the death certificate in order to support the claim for this filing status.
Because of all the tests involved, head of household is one of the most misunderstood filing statuses. The rules can be complex based on the family situation. It is the filing status most often claimed in error, and it's the second most common earned income credit error. That mistake could cause the taxpayer to owe additional taxes, along with penalties and interest. Let's have a look, shall we?
Head of household is for people who are unmarried or considered unmarried, paid more than half the cost of keeping up a home, and had a qualifying person living in their home for more than half the year. You will have many clients that tell you that they are head of their household. Or they'll say, I live in my own house and I pay all expenses. That's not what this means. You also have to have a qualifying person living in the house with you. The only person who does not have to live with you is your parent, and that is only if you claim them as your dependent.
A qualifying person for head of household must be related to you. Don't worry too much about these terms right now. We will explore them in detail later, but they must fall into one of these categories. First is a qualifying child, which is typically your child or your grandchild that lives with you at least more than half the year and that you care for. This can also be your married child that you can claim as a dependent. Other qualifying relatives include your older children and other relatives like aunts, uncles, nieces, and nephews that you can claim as dependents. And last, your dependent parent can also be a qualifying person for head of household. So what does considered unmarried mean? To be considered unmarried, a taxpayer has to be legally married, but living apart from the spouse at least the last 6 months of the year and file a return separate from the spouse. They must also pay more than half the cost of keeping up a home for them and their dependent children. If a taxpayer is considered unmarried and filing head of household, their qualifying person must be their child and not another relative like a niece or nephew or grandchild. Last, we have married filing separate, and it is fairly easy to determine. It's for a taxpayer who is legally married and cannot agree to file a joint return with their spouse, or chooses to file a separate return. This also applies to couples that are married and haven't seen each other in 20 years. We have a lot of clients that will come in and say that they are single, but if they are still legally married and not yet divorced, they must file married filing separate, unless their spouse agrees to file jointly. Note that if a client does have to file this way, they're going to need their spouse's social security number in order to file electronically. If they don't know their spouse's social security number, they're going to have to file a paper return. Married filing separate is often the worst filing status because it has the highest tax rates. There are many credits filers are ineligible to receive, including the earned income credit and the premium tax credit, and they may be forced to itemize deductions if the other spouse itemizes.
Now we're going to do some filing status practice. We will be using the flowcharts in publication 4012, which will be available for you to use at the tax site. Follow along as we use the charts to determine filing status.
Meet John. He has never been married, he lives on his own, and he has no dependents. Let's apply the rules to determine John's filing status. Step 1 is to determine if John was married at the end of the tax year. He was single, so we proceed to step 4. He did not have a spouse who died, so we proceed to step 6. He does not have a qualifying person that he supports financially to qualify him for head of household filing status, so John will file as single. Now meet Megan. She lived with her daughter Francesca all year. Francesca is 8 years old. Megan has never been married and pays all the expenses for herself and her daughter. Let's go through the steps again. Megan wasn't married, and she did not have a spouse who died. She paid more than half the cost of keeping up her home, but does her daughter Francesca qualify her for head of household? Let's find out. Francesca is Megan's daughter, and as an 8-year-old, she is also single. So she is a qualifying person for head of household, regardless of whether Megan can claim her as a dependent.
With a qualifying person in Francesca, Megan can claim the head of household filing status so long as she paid more than half the cost of keeping up her home, and Francesca lived with her for more than 6 months during the year.
So why is head of household better than single? Well, the standard deduction is higher and the tax rate is lower. Sounds pretty good to me. Let's try another example for determining the head of household filing status. Nancy and Jeff live together with their 2 children but have never been married. Nancy paid all of the household expenses. What do you think Nancy's most advantageous filing status is? Let's run through the steps again. Nancy was not married and did not have a spouse who died. She paid all the household expenses. Nancy has 2 children who live with her for the entire year, so she qualifies for head of household.
What about Jeff's filing status? Like Nancy, Jeff was not married and did not have a spouse that died. For step 6, since he did not pay more than half the expense of keeping up a home, we answer no. Jeff will need to file single. This is true even if he claims one or both of his children as dependents.
Meet Vanessa Franklin. She is not married. Her friend Christina and Christina's daughter Samantha live with her and have done so for a year and a half. Vanessa and Christina are not related, and neither Christina nor Samantha have any income. Finally, we learn that Vanessa pays all of the expenses for all of them, and no one else lived in the home. We know that Vanessa has never been married, so none of these questions apply. We also know that she paid more than half the cost of keeping up a home, but did she have a qualifying person living with her? Back to the qualifying person chart. We're considering Christina and Samantha, who are not related to Vanessa. Neither one of them is Vanessa's child or grandchild, or her parent. They are also not related to her. So we're looking at this question here. It says the person is not related to you in one of the ways listed and is your qualifying relative only because they lived in your home all year. We will talk about what a qualifying relative is later. Just know that this describes both Christina and Samantha, so neither one of them are a qualifying person for head of household.
In review, there are 5 filing statuses. Your filing status determines your standard deduction, tax rate, and eligibility for certain credits. You want to avoid married filing separately if you can, and you need a qualifying person to file head of household. These tests are different from the ones you'll learn next to determine dependency. You do not need to memorize this information in detail. Use your flowcharts in your 4012 to help you determine filing status. Remember, you are learning IRS terminology and rules. It can be confusing if you're not familiar, but working with these concepts will quickly become easier as you gain more knowledge and experience.
That's it for filing status. Next, we'll cover dependency.